so when I joined, it was a very quick learning curve. If you ever seen the film End of Watch with Jake Gyllenhaal, so so when you join, you think you're that. Okay, you think that you're going to run around like the streets of. So I started in Rochdale. You think I'm going to run around the streets of Rochdale, and I'm going to be a thief taker, and I'm going to sprint after people. I'm going to be fighting and doing all this stuff. And after about 3 months, I just stopped, and you realise it's not, and you realise that you're actually in control of an awful lot of risk. You have a lot of stress that you carry with you when you go home. You've made an assessment of something, and are you going to come in the next day and something terrible's happened, and this kind of thing. So all that excitement for me, for some people, they still act like that now, and they did, but for me, that kind of changed very quickly, and I saw. I don't really want to bash people here, but what I saw was people in positions that were not making logical decisions, that were not making clear rationale. And I was like, no, do you know what? Like, I'm not going to keep kind of having an argument with someone who's above me.
Scott, how are we?
Good morning, Mr. Fergus. I'm not too bad. I'm on a standing desk today, and I have quite bags under my eyes, but other than that, I'm not too bad. How are you?
Well, I shouldn't have actually asked how you were because I know that you've got a bulging disc, hence why you're at the standing disc. So, a rhetorical question, but I'm much better, I think. So, even if I was having a terrible morning, I'd say I'm fine in this case. Very British of me, but it's great to connect. We've known each other for years and years, and this has been a long time coming. And I'd just love to start with a question that I ask all my guests, which is as concisely as you can, who is Scott Britton?
He's a quite short Mancunian that doesn't know. So Scott Britton's head of battle cancer, owns Move Forwards Gym. Used to work in the police for about 13 years. Had a mildly okay career in powerlifting. Now has a very mediocre career in CrossFit.
That was concise. Well done. It's as if you're in the industry of talking about yourself.
Really weird, isn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah. But I think first thing I want to touch on is just that Mancunian element. Growing up in Manchester, the formative years, and what actually led you to joining the police force in the first place. Was it a sense of virtue? Was it a sense of duty? What got you there?
Yeah, so I mean, like to give the full basis, I grew up between Glasgow and Manchester. So I was at some points I had a very confusing accent as a child, which was mildly Glaswegian and mildly Manc. And as quite a chubby kid, that also brought even extra attention to the council estate that I grew up on in Manchester. Um, yeah, so I had not the easiest of upbringings. So I had a very difficult father who was the Glaswegian, very difficult mother. Grew up in a council estate in Salford. Went to school as normal, but had loads of issues back at home. And then dad left just before kind of starting high school. And then my mum, who was variantly reliant on all kinds of different substances for various issues. When I got to about 16, 17, like left home. So left home at quite an early age, kind of in that homeless bracket for a period of time. But really lucky that I was reasonably intellectual as a kid. So I managed to get really good GCSEs. So that really did help at that point. Also incredibly sporty because I was a fat kid and I needed to not be a fat kid for very long. So I managed to get myself into a Muay Thai gym, played rugby pretty well, played football, what I thought was well, but probably wasn't very well. And then managed to get through some sort of college accommodation and then live with various people through college. And I went off to uni, and then I just didn't really know what I wanted to do. But I'd been around a lot of people who were police officers. So I'd seen sort of from like my age of knocking around with other people. I'd done my work experience with the police. I went out with firearms and did loads of other stuff. And I'd kind of seen this thing that, I want a job where I'm not sat down every day. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't want to be a doctor. I didn't want to, be a mechanic or anything else. But I wanted to have an impact. So I knew, okay, I don't want to sit down every day and be in the same office, but I want to have an impact in stuff that I do. And growing up and seeing an awful lot of crime, being involved with lads and people and stuff that probably I shouldn't have been. So saw both sides and was like, well, that side opens up a lot of possibilities to me, and I can have a direct hand in helping people. So as opposed to sort of, um, working just for money or working just for an own individual gain. Hopefully I can do something that my experiences growing up and the things that I kind of work through myself, I could either A, stop happening to other people, or B, have an impact if it did happen to them, to kind of solving those problems. So the police seemed the most common sense one to me. It was a very difficult road getting in the police. My God, this shows how old I'm actually getting. At the time, it was the Labour government, and then it changed to the Conservatives. So they put everyone who was on hold to join the police. They cancelled all their applications because the Conservatives came in. This was when the beginnings of sort of like public cuts happened. So then I had to wait another 2 years before I actually got back in. And then once I joined the police, it was I'm not a particularly boastful person, but I had a very good career very quickly. So within a year, I'd already done my sergeant's exams. Within 2 years, I was a detective, went through various different special elements of working in the police, worked in child sex offences, surveillance trained, worked in surveillance, worked with firearms for a period of time. And then got into specialised units that was all in and around vulnerabilities. So whether it was children, whether it was adults with vulnerabilities, and then became a detective sergeant within, what was it, sort of 4 or 5 years. And then kind of went on to some sneaky jobs, some pretty big jobs at that point. But all the while, I was growing this thing at the other side. So I was always wanting to do something that was outside of the police, that was, again, going to impact people. And I kind of, the more I got in the police and the higher up I got, and the more I got into to sort of the politics and the control mechanisms in the police, the more I realized, like, even if I have a great idea, it's probably not going to get used. And I wanted to have an idea and to work for something that would impact people. And I think I was very lucky / hard working at the same time, that growing this concept that was Battle Cancer as a fitness movement and as a fitness event, it grew and grew and grew. And then just before COVID, literally about 3-4 months before COVID, I left the job, technically on a career break. So I've got about a 5-year career break, and went into running Battle Cancer full time. But that is my life in 5 minutes. So hopefully that's been pretty concise.
Just about. Very, very concise. There's obviously a theme underpinning all this, but it sounds like there was a thread of wanting to help people in a way that you almost hadn't been helped when growing up, which has been pulled steadily throughout your entire career and is now the bread and butter of what Battle Cancer is to a degree. But it's interesting to hear that the bureaucracy was what ultimately pushed you out to some degree to be able to empower yourself to do the things that you really truly wanted to do. But before we go on to the more recent things, I'd be interested to hear about the transition from what I assume was being a policeman out in the streets to start with, to going through the sergeant's exams, and then actually into what for most people I can imagine would be particularly traumatizing experiences to have, and particularly challenging experiences to have. So the transition from a mindset and a mental health point of view, was it everything you expected it to be, in the sense that the shock, the trauma, the things that you saw, the faith in humanity, all these things? What was the transition from Scott with all the ambition to Scott the detective managing these horrific cases?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question. I think so. When I joined, it was a very quick learning curve. If you ever seen the film End of Watch with Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah.
So when you join, you think you're that, right? You think that you're going to run around like the streets of. So I started in Rochdale. You think I'm going to run around the streets of Rochdale, and I'm going to be a thief taker, and I'm going to sprint after people. I'm going to be fighting and doing all this stuff. And after about 3 months, I just stopped, and you realize it's not. And you realize that you're actually in control of an awful lot of risk. You have a lot of stress that you carry with you when you go home. You've made an assessment of something, and are you going to come in the next day and something terrible's happened, and this kind of thing. So all that excitement, for me, for some people, they still act like that now, and they did. But for me, that kind of changed very quickly. And I saw, and I don't really want to bash people here, but what I saw was people in positions that were not making logical decisions, that were not making clear rationale. And I was like, no, do you know what? Like, I'm not going to keep kind of having an argument with someone who's above me when they're talking rubbish. So I was like, how do I change that? Okay, right. Well, I need to get promoted. So I did my sergeant's exams during my probation. So I was allowed to, which was great. And then I just went on a succession of asking specialist units if I could come in. So I basically didn't have any days off. I would knock on the door and go, right, I've got 2 days off later in the week. Can I come and work with you? I don't want any overtime. I just want to come and work and learn about this. And that's how I got kind of a really good reputation. And I was known for being really bang on with what I did, and also being a bit annoying by always asking questions and always going asking to kind of like go and do other stuff. And then I very quickly I found a job. This was when I was still in uniform. It's all public knowledge, so it's not an issue here. And a guy called Dean Farrer, who had at that point became the UK's highest number one online sex offender. But I discovered the job, so I went to a routine. Mum had found a girl with an iPad, all these images, etc., etc. So I was like, right, I'm going to find this geezer, because so much of that happens. So the kind of cyber units don't take it on until there's been a huge amount, because it just happens every time. So I just worked on it 4 or 5 weeks solid, days off, and I found the guy. I found him eventually. Went and locked him up a couple of days before Christmas. And ended up getting 10 years, and he had 32,000 online victims, and that job took me out of uniform, took me to dealing with the FBI, took me to dealing with Russian police, Barbados police, Swiss, French. So we'd had a succession of online sex offences around the world. It took me then into viewing these images. It's not something that you kind of ready yourself for to see, and also going having difficult conversations with parents. So we identified victims. So we spent 6 months identifying victims off images off his phone, and going finding them and telling the parents, and then safeguarding the children. So again, there's no training course for how do you tell a parent that the 3 or 4 year old, which some was that age, there was images of them, or telling 6, 7, 8, 9 year olds parents, well, unfortunately this guy made your child do X. So it becomes a very much learning on the job. And I think it's like an incremental step in your mind. You kind of go, okay, I've seen this now, right? Okay, that's what that is, and I can kind of process that, and then that's what that is, and I can process that. And then for me, I've always been pretty good at, it's not me, it's not affecting me, and the only way I can do that is to be professional, is to kind of put it away. So that was something that was a steep learning curve, dealing especially with sex offenders, because they're very selfish, they're very intelligent, they're very manipulative, and to deal with them and interview them. I remember my first interview with that guy, and I remember watching it back. So I had a great sergeant with me, Lou Ashbourne, and she came in with the interview, and we watched the interview back, and my hand's shaking, and all these people say, oh, if I saw a pedo, I'm gonna hit him. And it wasn't I didn't want to hit him. It was just this thing of like, I'd seen the depravity of what this man had done, and my body reaction, like my hand was shaking. So I went back in for the second interview a lot calmer, and I sat back instead of sitting up, and I had this structured plan, and I got him to admit it. He admitted everything, absolutely everything. And that was it. Then he was done, 10 plus years, dangerous sex offender. He still won't be out for quite a while. And from that, it was like, boom, I'm onto this thing, I'm onto that thing. Then I went on to historic offences. So I dealt with people that were abused back in the 70s and 80s. I arrested and interviewed an 87-year-old woman, which was a very interesting experience. Things like that. We went to. I've dealt with child death, so I was as a DS, I would go and be the person that would deal with a child death. So I've literally been there when a 4-year-old's died, been with the parents, multiple suicides. I'd say 60 to 100 that I would go and have to make the assessment, and some of them were in situations that you wouldn't begin to imagine, like the things that you would see that were. And I don't want to kind of go through them because it sounds gory to people, but it's not just taking pills, and it's not just people jumping off things. I've seen people that take their lives in some of the most horrific ways. And again, my mindset was, okay, that stays with me. But the best thing I can do for that individual now is look after their family. The best thing I can do for them is to ensure that the people that were around them and that they cared for, I can do my job the best. And if I let what I saw get to me too much, I wouldn't do that. So that was my mind process, to be professional. Where the camel's back sort of went a bit for me was when I moved down to Devon and Cornwall from Manchester, because I started in Manchester. There was a poor chap hung himself in some woods overlooking a beach, and we couldn't get him up. And so I remember having to carry him in a body bag up a hill, because I was the only person strong enough to do so. I was like, you know what, I think this is it. I've kind of done enough of this now. I was like, and at the same time, I was having battle cancer be so growing and having so much positivity in what I would do. And to not bash the police too much, there was a particular moment where I came up with an idea for an app that would help young people basically in need if they were taken or they were in child sexual exploitation. And I couldn't get it anywhere. No one would listen. And off the record, someone said to me, "If you were a chief inspector, that'd get picked up. It's amazing, but you're not high enough of a rank." And I was like, "Yeah, for me now, I've dealt with this shit. I've seen things. I've been professional. I've put up with stuff. I've gone home, and when Freya, my wife, has said how was today, I go, yeah, it was all right, and I don't tell her the things that I've seen and the people that I've carried and the stuff that I've touched. And I was like, no, if you're not going to back me with my ideas to help people, I'm going to go and do it on my own. And the police is a phenomenal thing. It's got loads of issues, obviously, but the people that are there is a number of phenomenal people, but it's got too many barriers for individuals to make an impact. It's a collective impact. So yeah, I don't know if that's a big long-winded way, but it's a succession of things that you see. And I think my growing up and seeing violence from a very early age and seeing things and being around things probably prepped me quite well, to how you kind of put that to one side. But it makes you just sad of the world, and I think that's the biggest thing, that if you spoke to most police officers, especially those that deal with death and more serious crimes, and you forget that that's 1%. That the 1% becomes your 100%, and you very quickly forget that there's unreal people out there. There's loving people, caring people, people doing fantastic things, and that's what I've kind of fed off from Battle Cancer. So everyone always goes, "Oh, Battle Cancer's so great, you do all this stuff," and I'm like, "No, I'm selfish." I was like, it gives me more reward than I think I do to anyone else. So yeah, I think that's hopefully not been too boring of a way of answering the question.
Not at all, not at all. It sounds like it's less of a desensitization and more of just a objectivity that you need to uphold to be able to actually get through the task at hand, which is the assessment of each case individually and then the following and subsequent tasks that come as a result of that. I think that's probably a skill that is difficult to learn, but one that's globally applicable, in the sense that no matter the reality, the harshness of the situation, there are next steps to be taken in some regard, and no matter how horrifying they might have been, there are things that need done as a result of the next steps. But was there a point that your own mental health started to suffer with the things that you were seeing? Because as you've said, you just become very sad with the world, and I felt like that a little bit existentially over the past 18 months, and there's a few days where I've just felt quite despondent and lost in everybody's reality, not just my own. So were there any specific situations, other than the one that you highlighted in Devon and Cornwall, that were specifically memorable for you?
Yeah, I think that very first big sex offence job was big, but I kind of managed to get through that. That was like a bit of a holy shit moment. That was like, so adults actually do this kind of thing, and seeing vulnerability of a child is huge. And again, I won't go into the details and stuff, but seeing some of the things that this individual had got children to do via the internet was mind-boggling. I'd say working on a particularly difficult historic child abuse case, only because there was certain elements of things that from the offender and from dealing with the victims. So dealing with victims is incredibly draining because, and this is not to be selfish, because, my job is to help victims, but victims become incredibly needy, as they should be. They share an awful lot with you, and if you've had elements of what that person's talking about or what that person's struggling with, it brings it back up, because we're quite good as humans of going, okay, I've had this trauma and I'm going to stick it away. And then when you hear something that's happened similar to someone else, it brings it back up. So that was particularly difficult. There was, like I said, it was a historic child abuse case. The poor people had been through the foster care system, but abused at various different points, and not sexually abused, but very physical, very psychological abuse. And it was a lot of that would echoed what had happened to me as a kid. So I would come home and be like, fucking hell, I just remembered this. So it brought you things back that I'd kind of put away. I'd say very early on, I used, and at the time it was powerlifting, I used lifting and then fitness as my escapism. So as my ability to kind of go to somewhere and get my head out. but that, the Manchester bombing as well was particularly bad. Like, I wasn't first on scene or anything. I worked on the aftermath. I think that there was just a, a, again, a holy shit. Like, this has happened. It's happened in our city. It's happened to people. When Nicola and Fiona, two police officers that were shot and killed by Dale Cregan, I remember seeing that on duty and just having this like shiver. And I remember then a week later going to something similar where I was called to a job to go and report a burglary, because this is what happened with Nicola and Fiona. And the person at the front door was saying, "Oh, I can't open the door, come round the back." And I'm like, "Oh, this is a bit weird." So as I'm kind of walking around the back, I'm thinking, and Cregan was still like wanted at that time. And I'm thinking, am I walking into something here? Am I walking into that? And that was again like this period of, you've lost. I didn't know Nicola and Fiona, but you suddenly became, oh my god, I could get killed doing what I do here. I didn't think that. People in the army are phenomenal. They have to deal with that every single day. I'd never dealt with that before. And then I'd say probably one of the kind of final ones that impacted me from being in the job was I worked on quite serious offender, a lot of surveillance, a lot of other stuff that went on. And I got a phone call saying, "Scott, you need to come in." Spoke to my boss. "Oh, we've had a credible death threat on your life. They've mentioned you specifically. We've gone and done an address that's linked to the telephone. Your home address is in that address. Like, so the offender knows where you live, and they've made a death threat." That was like, okay, this is now not affecting me. This is affecting my home. So this is affecting, like, she wasn't my wife then, but my wife now. And that becomes a different level of stress that and this is someone who was moving weaponry around the country. So it's someone who wasn't just saying, "Oh, I'm going to kill you," because you get that a lot. This was someone who could have had it, done, and they knew where I lived, and made the direct call. So that again was like a bit of a, how do I deal with this one? And you don't really know. No one prepares you. There's not a lesson when you join the police of how to deal with an organized criminal gang wanting to kill you. Lesson 101. Like, it doesn't. That doesn't happen. And no one sits you down. No one sits you down and goes, "Scott, think about this," or "How do you feel?" or how are you dealing with this? It's "Oh, Scott, by the way, we found this. This is this. This is this. Take your gear home with you. You're gonna have a panic alarm. We're gonna send patrols to sit outside your house." That's it. There's no mental protection. You get some physical protection, but you don't get any mental. So yeah, it's I'd say 4 or 5 during my 13 career where I was like, yeah, this is getting to me.
Well, it's hardly surprising. And as you said, the mental protection not being there and the support mechanisms mean that I can imagine for most people there is a breaking point. And it sounds like you met yours in Devon, which is no bad thing. It's not a sign of being broken by the job. I think it's almost just an expiry. Well, not even expiry date, because you are technically on sabbatical, aren't you? It's
but almost I ain't going back.
No, I knew that. But just in case, just in case there's any high-ranking police officers listening, which I'm sure there aren't. Then shh. But that thread that we discussed earlier, that you just sort of been pulling ever since your career began, has now grown into, excuse me, what I wouldn't know, what is it, the world's most successful cancer fundraising fitness? How do you categorize yourself? How would you sell Battle Cancer if I was an investor?
So in the nicest way, and we can chat offline about that. In the nicest way, we're the world's biggest functional fitness fundraising event. So we're not an OCR like Tough Mudder. We're not an OCR like Spartan. We're not a running event. We are the only one that uses functional fitness, and we've held events now in, I think we've had 15 different locations since we've started. We've got 12 events next year. We've ran 6 events this year, considering the impact on COVID. All in all, we've had about 22,000 people do a Battle Cancer event or activation. And the fundraising now sits at about 1.7 million, which is for 40 different cancer charities. I've not raised that. The events and the people that come to the events have raised that, and I always try and make that really clear that it's not me. So yeah, I would say we're the world's biggest and only fundraising, fitness event.
But there we go. That's phenomenal in many ways. I mean, the figures I've known for a while, and the model and the way that it brings community together is very, very clever. And I think we were just discussing before we set off that we've both been anticipating a sense of charity fatigue after the past
Yeah.
almost couple of years now, but past 18 months or so. But I think what people have been craving and missing is community, and that's why
Yeah.
Manchester, Belfast, and France for you guys has got off to such a flying start. But I remember when we were powerlifting buddies, I think it's knee wrap, nose talk,
Slapping each other.
meat heads, just clouds of chalk everywhere was how I remember that period. But one I look back on fondly. But we first connected there years before we sort of moved into a more aerobically conditioned state of existence. I think it's fair to say. I used to be defeated by a flight of stairs, but
Gave ourselves a few extra years of life.
I remember the first event that I saw you putting on, which was Lit the Titanic, and I was curious as somebody that had no interest in fundraising up until that point, no real interest in anything other than powerlifting and just sort of my day-to-day existence. It was something that 100% caught my eye. And do you want to just run us through the initial thinking behind that event, how it came together, what it was, how it unfolded, and how that then led to what ultimately is now?
Yeah, so I mean, the year before I had done a meat-free month to fundraise for Macmillan, and it was the worst thing I've ever done in my life. So you start talking about trauma, that was the worst thing for me. I could not do that ever again. Like corn was just this disgusting cardboard and eating beans and all this rubbish. And I'd fundraised like 250 quid, and I'd done this thing that I hated to do, and and most of that was from like my wife's mum, who's lovely and supports everything that we do. So I was like, what am I doing? I was like, I'm spending this time, this effort, and it's not doing much. It's 250 quid. Yes, it's 250 quid, but it's not really impacting. So I was like, I need to do something big. I need to do something that's going to capture people's minds at the same time. So I was Googling like, what's heavy? So I was like, okay, how heavy is the Eiffel Tower? I was like, oh, actually, that's not that big. And it was like, how heavy is a mountain? Whoa, that's too big. And then I settled on the Titanic. I was like, okay, well, the Titanic sunk. So, and I wanted deadlift. I wanted to deadlift the weight of X. That was my thing. I was like, I can deadlift the weight of X across this time. Now, I got the maths wrong, very, very wrong from the beginning. So I vividly remember saying to her, I was like, I'm going to deadlift the weight of the Titanic. And I've worked it out, and it'll only take me 12 hours on my own if I do 10 sets of 10 every hour on this thing. And I looked and it was like, no, that's 1,000 tons. So it wasn't 27 tons, it was like 27,000 tons. So I was like, yeah, that's not going to happen with just me, is it? I'd probably still be deadlifting now if I'd have started that, like 6 years ago.
You'd certainly have a bulging disc sooner, I think.
Yeah, too right. So definitely then. So it kind of evolved this thing. I was like, right, well, maybe if I get a group of people, we can do it. So, and then I was like, everybody loves a Guinness World Record. How do I get this in the newspaper? How do I get it on local TV? Everyone loves a Guinness World Record. So I applied for that, and I was like, the most deadlifted by a group in 12 hours with 12 people. It took months because I didn't want to pay the fee because Guinness charges
They
an
are,
absolute
for anyone listening,
fortune.
they are, I'm not afraid to say, a scam of an organisation.
Yeah,
Despite
100%.
every interaction I had with them, other than one pleasant Mobro, was abysmal. Just
Yeah.
everything about them. It's just pure monopoly arrogance, is all it is.
And so like very quickly I was told, and this is where the kind of stubborn bastard in me comes out. So they were like, well, you can pay us 20k, we'll come and do everything, and you'll get the thing. And I was like, well, 20k
plus expenses, plus travel expenses.
Yeah.
Don't forget, and 2 meals. Oh, it's ridiculous.
So I was like, yeah, I can't afford that, guys. So I was like, how else can I do it? So they make this almost impossible task for you to do it. And I was like, no, you've give that me now. I will do that. So you had to have 3 cameras that were independently run, where you had multiple backups. You had to have independent judges judge every single rep, all this other stuff. So we did it. And I was like, I tell you, I've done every little thing that you wanted me to do. And we got it in the end. But it was bigger than the 12. So I was like, okay, well, we're going to do this 12. But what if we set out loads of bars? And what if people come and pay a fiver to just do a few deadlifts, and then they get a certificate, so they get to be part of raising the Titanic. So they're not going to get the Guinness record, but we won't lift the Titanic in the Guinness record. We need as many people to do it as possible. So Olympic Gym, Paul and Tanya, absolutely brilliant at opening the doors for us and let us do it. And they did it themselves and got involved. And then we had the back room and the front room with people deadlifting. And I was like, still not enough. So I rang every pure gym in the country. I rang every single one and said, look, you can stick deadlift bars out. I'll send you some pieces of paper. We'll put some balloons up. We'll do this. We'll do that. So in the end, I think I got about 34 different pure gyms. And then I managed to get about, I think it was like 15 or 16 other independent gyms that were going to do it. So all in all, it was nearly 50 gyms. And we raised £42,000 from Macmillan. And from 250 the year before to then spending this 6 months of organising this one event to raise £42,000, I was like, shit, this is the thing. I was like, I don't need to do the thing myself. I need to put my effort into collectively bringing everyone in. And it wasn't even just the money, it was the conversations that started. There were so many people that I met that I know now still and are involved in battle cancer now from Raising the Titanic who said they'd lost their mums, their dads, they were going through cancer themselves. And this was the first time that they'd been asked to be involved in something that wasn't running. It wasn't a marathon, it wasn't a 5K or a 10K or an OCR. So I then tried for about a year probably to try and get powerlifting competitions that were charity based, and it's impossible. And it's not
Yeah.
because people in powerlifting are bad people. It's a lower economically based sport, so most people are not particularly rich. It's not easy to set up, to get a venue, to get kit there. And it's a competition, so it's difficult to kind of say your ticket fee goes to a donation and people don't fundraise on top. So instead, I was like, right, and this is a dead honest thing, and I've spoke to people, and I've even spoke to CEO of CrossFit about this. People in CrossFit are very wealthy. They tend to come from higher socioeconomic. You look at actually the figures, and most of them have a degree. In America, most have a college degree. In America, most earn between 80K and 100 plus K. And over here, again, very similar. But the key thing with CrossFit and then functional fitness was the community, and they were all bought in. So everybody trained together. Everyone had a class together. In powerlifting, it's a very individualistic sport. You might get a tiny training group of maybe 2, 3, 4, but it's still quite rare. Where you had 50 people that were constantly training together, and they knew each other, and they'd have socials. They'd have a barbecue. They'd do this. So I was like, right, that's what I need to do. I need to put on a CrossFit style event, but get it that people come in and then they fundraise because of the challenge. So the first year, I had no idea. I went and booked the biggest venue I could find in Manchester. I paid the deposit out of a credit card. I still had like another £9,000 to pay off, and I was like, holy shit, like if these people don't come, I've got a big bill on this. And worked just really hard for a year. I went to gyms, social media, we created a website, we had a first logo that's not the logo what it is now. And we managed to put an event on, and the event again did 40 plus grand on one day. And I was like, this cemented it. And we got better every event, and we still do now. We refined it. So at the beginning, it was still too hard. It was too CrossFitty, and it still put people off. Where now, 90+% of people that come into our events have never done an event before. We've got more and more people now from outside of CrossFit gyms that come and do our events. We've got people that list they've never been to a gym at all that come and do our event because they see it as a challenge. So there's no leaderboard. There is a leaderboard, but it's based on your fundraising. So you actually only get rewarded on the leaderboard depending on how high you fundraised, and that's how prizes are given. And so it went from this one in Manchester to the next year. I was like, nobody's put an event on in London. So I went and booked the biggest venue, and then that was 40 grand the venue. I was like, oh shit, if I really messed this one up, I'm definitely done.
Not many credit cards have that limit.
Exactly. And I didn't. So then we managed to, we did that one, and that one did 60 grand. And I was like, wow, okay, in a year I've done 100 grand. This is it. And the second year I was like, right, where else can I go? So third year, I went from Manchester in year one after the powerlifting and raising the Titanic. So by year three, we'd done Madrid, Berlin, Dublin, Manchester and London, and we'd done a US fundraising tour through the whole of California. And then we were kicking into like full-time year then. This was when it was going to be like boom. And then COVID hit. So we've taken COVID as a time to basically become really professionalized. We've got 8 staff now. We've got 12 events next year. We've run the 6 this year, and each of the 6 has been bigger. Fundraising has already eclipsed from those individual events this year what we used to do in an entire year. Some fantastic brand partners, some great campaigns, real pinch me moments when we had a campaign with Chris Hemsworth, Matt Damon, Michael Fassbender, Danny Alves, we had UFC stars, we had Hollywood stars, like it was crazy. So it's been a really crazy, weird ride from me thinking I could lift the weight of the Titanic on my own to now working full time, owning a gym. We've got a battle cancer program. We've helped over 200 people worldwide have free fitness classes post cancer. We're going to be launching the battle cancer qualification. It'll be Simsbury accredited. That'll be fully backed. That's going to be one of the cheapest accreditations as a PT or a fitness professional you're going to be able to get. And it gives you free access to the program to help people. So yeah, it's been crazy. It's been such a weird time, and it's almost I forget about raising the Titanic, and there's still a very embarrassing website that we created that's still live. So when you see Raising the Titanic's website compared to Battle Cancer's website now, it's absolutely
I will
hilarious.
endeavour to find that and put it in the show notes. But
I think it's a .net or a .org or something like that.
oh, I'll find it. Don't you worry, Scott. But for those listening that might not have seen what Battle Cancer do, I would just urge you to go and watch a YouTube video or two around what the events actually look like, because it's very unique and it's just very powerful to see people to come together in such a creative way. It's not, there aren't events like it, really, are there? I mean, obviously you'll say
No,
you could probably be modest and say that there are somewhere, but I've never seen anything like it personally that brings people together in such a harmonious way.
not with the focus. There was an event that kind of launched this year called Ultra Events that was very CrossFit focused, and it said, "Oh, you can raise money for cancer research," and that's the closest I've seen. But theirs was like they've not published how much they've raised. It was more of a like we support cancer research along the way, where we're the first ones that have done it, where your score is how much you fundraise,
Yeah.
and then you undertake the challenges. And we don't use a barbell, we don't use a rig. The heaviest thing that you'll use on the day is a 30-kilo sandbag, but we use rowing machines, bikes, and everything is in team of four. So everything has synchronized. You go, I go. We have people carrying each other, jumping over each other. We have people, doing wheelbarrows. We had a potato sack race in in Dublin, which was a 400-meter potato sack race. That kills you. So we've done things that, yeah, and it's not, everyone says, oh, we're the world's this and we're the world's that. Like there isn't anyone. We've been around the world. There's nobody that does what we do.
That's the powerlifter in you, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
a world champion of my mate's back garden federation.
Where there's only one lifter in your weight class, but I'm still the champion.
But no, it's been incredible to see unfold, and I think most exciting thing for me to watch as a bystander was announcing the partnership with CrossFit this year. So do you just want to illuminate a little bit more about what that entails?
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, I'm also going to tease you now because, in January, we're going to announce the biggest partnership that I never, ever believed would ever happen in my entire life. However, prior to that one, so I'm going to have to come back on and speak in January.
You will. I mean, I'm going to have to be very careful not to slip up now. as I know what it is, but now that you've mentioned it, it'll be at the front of my brain. But continue. I'll just keep my mouth shut.
So with CrossFit was crazy. I talk about how year one I got an email of CrossFit's lawyers, and I've said this to them, so it's not anything that's funny. Saying do not use the word CrossFit, because I used CrossFit in a post on year one. They went, if you use CrossFit again, we'll issue a cease and desist, and then we'll sue you. And I was like, oh shit! Like these guys, they're partnered with Reebok and they're huge. Like I can't do that. So for about a year, I had this really bad thing in my head about CrossFit as a company. I was like, why are they targeting this? Like, why do they care? I'm a charity event. Why do they care? And then there's been a change of guard at CrossFit. And CrossFit's been through some really bad kind of imagery stuff when Greg Glassman was in charge. And now Eric Rose is here. Eric Rose has come from, technology background, incredibly wealthy man, incredibly intelligent, but also incredibly focused in on the community. And I sent Eric an email, not thinking I'd get anything back. He emailed me back 2 days later saying, I've just taken over. Can you give me a month? And then we'll chat. I was like, cool. Wow. Yeah, that's really like a respectful, professional way of dealing with it. So a month and a bit later, got on a call with him. He was eating his lunch, so I had about half an hour to try and tell him about what we do and give him an update. And it's difficult. This guy's a billionaire. He's made massive tech companies, so I'm aware of not his status as the owner of CrossFit. I'm aware of his status as a professional and how to deal with that. And he loved it. He loved the concept. He couldn't believe what we were doing, and he was like, right, we need to be partnered. We want you to use the word. We want to get you to the games. We want to give as much support for you from media and everything else. And they have, they really have. We use the word CrossFit not it is as a challenge. So we've had it in the title this year. Next year we're not going to have it in the title, but we're still going to be huge partners of CrossFit, and it's going to still be a massive thing of what we do. And we've had people that go, do you know what? I go and do Zumba, but I've done a CrossFit challenge. You need to fundraise, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why so many people have fundraised so much this year. Average team fundraising has risen to 1,000. Because people have gone, oh my God, CrossFit's so hard, and it isn't. It's scalable, but most people don't see that from the outside world. So we used it as a moniker. But yeah, to partner with this company and be given the support and to be at the CrossFit Games and heading up, I talking and leading a workout on the field at CrossFit Games with all these other non-profits, to be able to be, I'm directly almost every other week speaking to the CrossFit Foundation new head. We talk about really exciting stuff. We talk about lobbying the US government to see functional fitness as medicine, and to be able to be prescribed by private healthcare providers to those that have had cancer or having cancer treatment. So this is the impact of what that partnership is. It's not just giving me the name. Chris, who's just taken over the foundation, he's lobbied to the government before, and we're already talking about the strategy of how we do that in the US. We talk about the strategy of how we do that in the UK, because I want functional fitness, or just fitness in general, for a doctor to write you a prescription for that. And that doesn't happen in it really. So, I'm nearly getting there. We've been able to present to a bipartisan parliamentary group at the beginning of next year about this, but having the weight and backing of CrossFit, their lawyers, their data, their impact, as they've lobbied so many times before, especially in the US. It's incredibly exciting to me because it transcends the events. It means it will actually make an impact, and people's lives will actually change as a result of what we're trying to do. And the events are phenomenal, fundraising's phenomenal, but I want to create and enact a lasting difference. And I think that's possibly only going to really happen with CrossFit and a partner that's going to be coming in January. So yeah, really, really cool, very exciting. Yeah, and it's kind of weird that the CEO of CrossFit, I can just WhatsApp him. It's kind of odd. Don't know.
Yeah, it's odd. It is odd. Yeah, hopefully you don't get hacked anytime soon. Otherwise, there'll be a big GDPR problem. But I know it'll be difficult, and it's probably an unfair question. But along the way, have there been any real pinch me highlight moments from a community and a human point of view that have really made you realise the impact of what you're doing? And I know you won't want to discriminate X versus Y person in any way, but I'm sure they'll all be aware of the impact they've had from your perspective. But just for the listeners, what are the main moments?
I mean, wow. I mean, there's loads, and that's really interesting. Because when you talk about pinch me moments, I don't talk about the partnerships. I don't talk about the celebs. I don't talk about even the fundraising. It's the people, and there's there's so many. I mean, even just this year. So even if I'm just focusing on this year, young lad Rob Bychan lives up in Scotland, in the arse end of Scotland as well. It was really far away. Really keen CrossFitter. He was I think he was like the fourth fittest teen in the world or something. Developed a really aggressive brain tumor. He added, it was like, I think something like 10 kilo body weight due to the treatment and the reaction to it. And really difficult treatment through COVID. Got in contact with him, managed to speak an awful lot. We organised some really cool stuff. So we met some people over Zoom during COVID, like Sarah Sigmund's daughter and a few other people. We got him sent some stuff. And then he came and did Battle Cancer Manchester with his family, and he's been training for it. And he was terrified, like he was absolutely bricking it. And he came, and his team was him, his brother, his mum, and his girlfriend. And that is the beauty of Battle Cancer. That was his team. And all throughout the day, he interacted with other people who'd had brain tumors. So Craig McIver, who's one of the coaches at our gym, he's been a big part of what we've done at Battle Cancer, brain tumor survivor, been at so many Battle Cancer events, huge part of the team, interacted with Craig and met him and learned about actually there's a life after the treatment, there's a life after what's happened. And the message off his mum a couple of days afterwards was just heart-wrenchingly beautiful. And the difference it's made to that young man. Belfast last week, we had a mum there whose son is, unfortunately his leukemia has come back, where he's only 7, doing something for him. Even one of our volunteers, he'd had cancer himself, and I opened up Belfast with talking about how nobody loses their battle with cancer, and I hate hearing when the media says Sarah Harding lost her battle with cancer. She didn't lose a battle. She died. She battled. She did not lose what she was doing. And that's how I started the speech in Belfast. And, this gentleman sent a message afterwards saying it brought all this stuff back to him. And, it reminded him of how his inner strength was. In Madrid a few years ago, we had a team of people that was still undergoing treatment do the event. At the final of their last heat, we didn't even organize this. All the participants, because they were wearing a charity top, created a human tunnel and clapped them through. And they were all in tears, and the family were there. Spanish media were there. We've had Manchester this year. In a team was a lady who'd recovered from breast cancer during COVID, and a woman who lost her younger sister to breast cancer earlier this year. And we met her on a fundraising tour earlier in the year. And again, she messaged and said, it's not about the fundraising for the event has been a focus and something to take her mind away. And her entire family had been there. And this happens all across the world. And that's been the beauty of the impact, is that I've heard people tell me in German, in Spanish, in French, with an American accent, with a Scottish accent, with an English accent, a Scouse accent, a Southern accent. They all talk about how it's brought them together, and they've met people and they've created a community. There's a lady, again, you talk about pinch me moments. Almost on the flip side, she sent us a message this week saying, look, I just want to let you know I'm in a team for Battle Cancer London in October. I competed in the last one and it was phenomenal. I'm now suffering from breast cancer myself. Can I still do it? And we were like, yeah, of course you can still do it. That's the whole point. But so we've had the flip. We've had people who've competed and developed cancer and now do the event. We've had people who've had cancer and watched our event on social media having chemotherapy, then do the event the next year and be surrounded by their loved ones. And we've had many people pass away. We've seen people, and this sounds really weird thing to say, but people who interacted with our account on Instagram, and then you check their post, they've not posted for a few months, and then there'll be a post pop up from their mum, the dad, the brother, or sister saying, such and such has passed away. Even on the Battle Cancer program, we've phenomenal results, like unreal. We've had one lady who's only got one lung. She managed to walk 1K completely unaided, and she couldn't walk up her stairs without stopping when she started. In 12 weeks, from not walking up her stairs to walking 1K. We've had a lady who's just squatted a 100-kilo back squat after a double mastectomy. And a previous, before she even had treatment, was like, what was it, 65 kilo. So she's added 45 kilo under our program. A lady whose goal was to tie her own hair up because the mastectomy had struggled to do that. She can now bring her hand completely above her head and tie her own hair. So she said for the first time in 3 years, she's been able to tie her own hair and not ask her husband or her kids to do it. It's those things where you're like, oh my God, I can't quite put it into words what it does inside, but it gives you a fire to do more. And that's why I'm like, no, more, bigger, 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 because it becomes addictive. You want to keep hearing these things. So I wish there was one, but there's hundreds and hundreds of those moments in the past few years.
I knew there would be. It's just amazing to hear because, I've seen some of these firsthand, and it's just incredible stories left to right, everywhere you look, which is why it's such a incredible organisation. But I think just to close off, people have probably been listening to this thinking, "Oh my God, what an incredibly esteemed career! Look at the impact Scott's having. Look at the amount of work he's doing. Look at all the training he's doing. Look at the fact that he's doing all this stuff at once." I can't cope with what's on my plate, or I want to have more of an impact, or I want to approach things in a different way. What would be if you could distill down the sort of makings of what allowed you to be productive, ambitious, and driven in the way that you are, what advice would you give to those that are feeling that way?
Yeah, I think number one, it's always like, yes, those things are all very positive, and how you've said you could see that. But what you don't see is the times that I'm stressed. You don't see the times that I'm pulling my hair out, or like pacing around, or I have to go and smash out something in the gym because stuff isn't right, or you don't see the times I'm really tired and moody. So I think that there's often a missed jump between seeing something that becomes a successful output, but not seeing that the method actually isn't necessarily always the healthiest. It's not necessarily the best. So, just because, very kind of you to say those things, but the method of getting there is not always, the best way. And there's been moments of where, especially during COVID, I've been sat there thinking, oh my God, this responsibility I've got. I mean, like, what if this messes up? What if this stops tomorrow? And that was really difficult. What I try and say to people is, think about a project or life as your car windscreen, but it's fogged up and you can't quite see out of it. So you're driving and it's fogged up, because life is, you're still moving. Life will always keep moving. But how do you start? Well, you need to just start by demisting the bottom bit of it, and then once the bottom bit of it is, you can see a little bit more, so you can drive a bit more in the right direction. And as it demists and demists and demists, you then get the full picture and you know exactly where you're driving. And for me, that's what the past sort of 10 years has been, longer, since leaving home. I never knew where I wanted to go. I didn't know the best way of going about it. But what I knew is I had to do little mini things all at once. So, and those mini things are not just task based. Those mini things are like, I have to look at how I speak to people. That's one thing to clear up. Like, how do I interact with people? The second is my own mental health. Like, if I'm not right, how am I expecting everyone else to be right? How am I going to be the best me and the best leader in this organization? And how am I going to, support people if I'm not okay? So that was a big part of sort of clearing that misty windscreen. And with that meant, like, resilience tools. Training for me is that. So people go, oh, you train all the time, you're so dedicated. I'm like, no, actually, that's the thing that keeps me really sane. That's the thing that keeps me where I'm going to be, and it gives me another thing to do. Also, having triggers. I have triggers in my mind where it's like, okay, Scott, you're not making any sense. You're typing, you're stressing about work. You need to stop, because you're not productive. You're not doing anything good. You're just stressing about things. So the triggers becomes another little bit that's cleared out, and putting those in as reminders to me of, like, if I'm thinking this, that means I've got to do something else. Or if you're not very good at stopping yourself, giving someone who's around you what that trigger should be, because it's difficult for your friends and family to tell you when to stop. But if you say, look, when I'm being like this, tell me this kind of code word and get me to stop, and then I'll stop and keep me on the right path. And I think having people around you that share your vision, just as a plucking it out the air, but Johnny is someone in your life that believes wholeheartedly in you and your mission, what you do. I probably loves you as a brother, as a son, as a friend, and he's backing you. And I'm incredibly lucky to have that many people with me as well. I've probably got about 7 or 8 people that are like that with me. So it's not just what you see the output; it's all those things underneath. But having that misty windscreen, it's just start by clearing a little bit, and you will eventually end up driving the right way. Um, and it sounds really stupid and a bit patronizing, but eating well, not drinking that much. I don't drink, but that's like a stomach thing. But eating well, not drinking that much, not just for aesthetics, it's good for your head. And I think, when you turn to drink, you turn to shit food, you turn to this other stuff as a reaction, it's a negative enforcing a negative. But that takes time, it takes a long, long time. But people, triggers, making your own mental health a priority, number one. And yeah, just sticking with things. Do you know how many times I've been told no? Like, you see these things and I say, yeah, we've had this partnership and yeah, we've helped this people. I've either been ghosted or been told no 100,000 times. I've sent thousands and thousands of emails to people and to organizations and to gyms and been told no. And it's just about keep banging that drum, because eventually you'll make a noise. So enough of those kind of weird little sayings for things, but they're my coping mechanisms. They're my kind of how we're getting on this journey.
And most importantly, it didn't happen yesterday. It's been 15
Christ,
years in
no.
the making. So that's
Yeah.
something that's easily forgotten, isn't it?
Look at powerlifting. I don't want to hark on about it, and I know you want to wrap up, but you look at powerlifting and you look at what you finally lifted, but see how long it took you to get there and how many increments you made. Unless you've got some extra assistance from some places where you'd see people magically appear and have a very different lift. But you might put on 2.5 kilo in a 6 month or 8 month rotation. And it looks like nothing, but it took that long to get it to be done.
The additional layer there as well is there were so many times that I thought I had something in the tank, or I thought I had something there that I'd worked for, and it wasn't there. And it's just a case of I was doing all this work, doing all the things that I thought were right, and then on the day it wasn't what I expected it to be. But it wasn't a case of, oh well, that's it, game over, let's do something else. It was a case of, right, back to the drawing board, we go again. So a great example, and I'm currently midway through a training phase in knee wraps, so the nostalgia is rife. But no, thank you very much, Scott. Really enjoyed that, and great to hear a lot of the insights on the sort of more broadly professional Scott Britton rather than just the fitness focused Scott, because there's a lot that makes up a person, and you are a person with a lot that has made you up. I think it's fair to say. So thank you again.
No, thank you. It's nice to talk about it, because instead of just saying, what do you eat? What's your macros? What's your training split? Do you have rest days? How many times do you train? How tall are you? How much do you weigh? It's nice to actually talk about some stuff that I did used to do pretty well. So, yeah.
Good man. We'll speak soon.
Thank you very much, sir.